Trump just exploded over a $6.4 billion bridge, and within hours, Canada's countermove left Washington scrambling to contain the fallout. Because this wasn't a routine policy disagreement. This was a late-night political detonation aimed at one of the most critical trade arteries in North America, a bridge not even open yet, but already sitting at the center of a geopolitical standoff. When Donald Trump threatened to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, the message wasn't subtle. He argued the United States was being taken advantage of and suggested compensation should come before the first truck ever crossed. But by sunrise, the response from Canada shifted the entire narrative. To understand why the reaction was so swift and so controlled, you have to understand what this bridge actually represents. Linking Windsor, Ontario and Detroit, Michigan, the crossing was designed to handle roughly 8,000 trucks a day, moving goods through one of the most integrated manufacturing corridors on Earth. This isn't just another border link. Nearly a quarter of all merchandise trade between Canada and the United States flows through this region, much of it tied to auto production and advanced manufacturing supply chains that operate on near-continuous cross-border movement. And here's the detail that detonated political tension. Canada financed the project almost entirely on its own. The total cost reached roughly $6.4 billion, covering not just the bridge span, but customs, plazas, highway connections, and supporting infrastructure on both sides of the border. Under a 2012 agreement negotiated with Michigan, the state contributed no upfront construction funding. In exchange, it secured joint ownership of the completed asset and will receive 50% of net toll revenue once Canada recovers its costs. That structure wasn't hidden. It was negotiated publicly, signed by Michigan's Republican governor at the time, Rick Snyder, and approved through formal federal channels. In 2013, the U.S. State Department issued the presidential permit required for construction. In 2017, Trump himself joined Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in calling the bridge a vital economic link. By 2019, he had signed legislation allocating U.S. customs funding tied to the project, which is why his February 2026 threat landed with such shock. He claimed Canada owned both sides of the bridge and implied the U.S. deserved compensation before opening. But that framing immediately collided with documented legal reality. Canada does not own both sides. Michigan holds joint ownership and future revenue rights without having financed construction. American steel and American labor were also used extensively on the U.S. side. The pushback inside Michigan was immediate and unusually bipartisan. Former Governor Snyder publicly corrected the ownership narrative, warning that blocking the bridge would hurt Michigan's economy more than Canada's. State leaders echoed the concern, emphasizing the crossing's role in supporting auto jobs, manufacturing supply chains, and regional trade resilience. Because the economic logic behind the bridge is hard to overstate. For decades, heavy truck traffic across this corridor depended almost entirely on the aging Ambassador Bridge, a privately owned crossing that effectively held a monopoly on commercial freight movement. The new bridge introduces redundancy, freeway-to-freeway connectivity, and reduced transit bottlenecks. Studies estimate transit times could drop by up to 20 minutes per trip, saving billions in logistics costs over the coming decades. Blocking it wouldn't just stall infrastructure, it would preserve a single point of failure in one of the most critical trade routes on the continent. Against that backdrop came Canada's countermove, measured, precise, and strategically restrained. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't escalate publicly. He called Trump directly. In that conversation, he laid out 4 factual pillars. Canada financed the project, ownership is shared under the 2012 agreement, workers and materials came from both nations, and the bridge serves mutual economic interests. He then stated he looked forward to its opening. No rhetorical fire. No retaliatory threats, just documented facts and calm confidence. Publicly, Carney reinforced the message, calling the bridge a symbol of cooperation vital for commerce and tourism, while signaling continued diplomatic dialogue. The contrast in tone was striking. Political heat from Washington, strategic coolness from Ottawa. The White House later reiterated its concerns about Canadian ownership, framing the bridge as an arrangement where the United States had been strategically disadvantaged. But that assertion ran directly into a wall of documented reality. The ownership model, financing structure, and revenue-sharing terms were not new revelations. They were negotiated openly more than a decade earlier, codified in bilateral agreements, reviewed through federal permitting channels, and reinforced through subsequent funding legislation. Presidential permits were issued. Customs appropriations were signed. Joint statements were released. The legal and financial architecture surrounding the project had been examined repeatedly across multiple administrations, including Trump's own first term. So what had actually changed wasn't the bridge. It was the geopolitical atmosphere surrounding it. Trade tensions had hardened. Provincial retaliatory measures, including targeted restrictions on certain American goods, had injected friction into cross-border commercial relations. At the same time, Canada had begun diversifying trade exposure, pursuing agreements that signaled it wasn't solely dependent on US market access. From Washington's perspective, that external engagement risked diluting American economic leverage inside North America's integrated supply system. In that shifting climate, the bridge's symbolism evolved. What was once framed as cooperative infrastructure started being viewed through a competitive lens. Instead of representing mutual capacity expansion, it became a strategic node, a physical asset sitting at the intersection of trade flow, manufacturing, logistics, and political leverage. That reframing is what turned the project into a pressure point. Infrastructure, when tied to supply chains, carries influence far beyond its physical footprint. Control access, delay activation, or politicize regulatory clearance, and you exert downstream pressure across industries that rely on uninterrupted movement. The bridge's significance made it a visible instrument through which broader grievances could be signaled without imposing formal trade sanctions. Yet despite the political escalation, the project itself never deviated from its course. Construction timelines held, engineering milestones were met, regulatory frameworks remained in place, no permits were revoked, no bilateral agreements were dissolved. The contractual backbone supporting the crossing proved insulated from the political turbulence unfolding above it, and the economic logic driving its creation remained unchanged. The Detroit-Windsor corridor continues to function as one of the most densely integrated manufacturing zones globally. Automotive components, industrial machinery, agricultural goods, and energy-linked materials move through this artery in synchronized cycles. Efficiency gains at this crossing translate directly into production stability, cost predictability, and supply chain resilience for firms on both sides of the border. Once operational, the bridge will channel thousands of daily commuters into cross-border labor markets, while facilitating the movement of roughly 8,000 commercial trucks per day. Its freeway-linked design eliminates urban bottlenecks that have historically slowed freight movement, compressing transit times and reinforcing logistical redundancy in a corridor previously dependent on a single primary truck crossing. Financially, the toll structure ensures cost recovery for Canada while granting Michigan a long-term revenue stake in a multi-billion-dollar trade asset it did not finance upfront, embedding shared economic upside into the bridge's operational future, which leaves a broader strategic reflection lingering beyond the immediate dispute. If the structure, agreements, and economic benefits never changed, why did the rhetoric surrounding it escalate so sharply? That question reframes the entire episode. Because when infrastructure becomes leverage, the physical asset is rarely the true target. It becomes a proxy, a tangible pressure mechanism deployed within a wider negotiation landscape, shaped by trade balances, market access, and geopolitical alignment. And that reality underscores the deeper stakes. When leaders begin treating shared economic lifelines as bargaining instruments, disputes stop being about engineering projects or financing formulas. They become contests over who holds influence over the systems that keep continental commerce moving and how far political power is willing to reach into the arteries of economic interdependence.